We now will get the stage organized, ladies and gentlemen, for the next session. And this, of course, for our online viewers, this is the time in which you will click on special session number 3. Okay. Now, this upcoming session is about the circular green economy and a greener energy future. Allow me to read through who the panelists are. We have Dr. Shama Al-Malik, Strategic Affairs Executive Director, Abu Dhabi, Department of Energy. Dr. DJ Pandian, Vice President, Investment Operations, Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB. Professor Tatsuya Terazawa, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, the Institute of Energy Economics, Japan. Mr. Joseph McMonigal, Secretary General, International Energy Forum. Mr. Philippe Delorme, Executive Vice President, Energy Management, Schneider Electric. Now, with us moderating this panel, ladies and gentlemen, is Managing Director, Resources Industry Lead, Accenture, Southeast Asia. Please welcome on stage Paul Carthy.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. And good afternoon to my esteemed panelists. Nice to see you all. Hope you're all well and safe virtually. So today, yes, all around the circular economy and making the world greener. So we have a mix of panelists today from public sector, private sector. And I think I wanted to talk about 4 things to get things moving. The first is the principles of the circular economy. The first one is obviously we want to make sure that waste is completely designed out of our processes in the future. The second one, the materials that we use are used as long as possible for productive use. The third, when those materials do have to come out of use, that we put them back into the cycle. And then the fourth one really is around how we try and completely decouple growth from anything that is linked to the consumption of scarce and dangerous or harmful resources. So I think society is pushing for the circular economy. You know, we have to move from linear to circular. We heard a lot today about governments making sure this is happening, putting new regulations in place, making sure taxes are put on the right things. So maybe we could start on the public sector side of our panelists. Maybe I can start with yourself, Dr. Shama. In your role, which is related to strategic affairs, with the Department of Energy. What is your view on how things are moving, especially in your part of the world, in the UAE, to make sure that we can move to that circular economy at pace?
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, scaling up the green transition is underpinned by a paradigm shift to clean and renewable energy and supported further by incorporating a number of enabling conditions. Our approach in UAE includes many items, for example, deploying sustainable finance and applying environmental standards into our regulatory and policy framework to drive economic diversification and attract the investment. Abu Dhabi, I'm sure you already heard about it, that recently, actually last January, announced the Green Bond Program. This initiative was a joint initiative between Department of Energy, where I came from, and Abu Dhabi Global Market and Abu Dhabi Security Exchange. The aim of this initiative was to establish Abu Dhabi as a regional hub for issuing green bonds and green sukuk for strategic and sustainable projects in the Emirate and across Middle East and Africa. So if we are talking about the enablers for this environment, for this energy transition, we believe that investing in a sustainable project is imperative to a healthy recovery. So we will continue to leverage our solar resources and boost exploration of enabling technologies such as renewable hydrogen. And we will continue to adapt our regulatory and policy framework to support integration of clean and renewable energy into our system. Another, if I want to add more about the enabling items, it is increasing in energy efficiency and behavioral change as well. It is very important. And all of you know that this item is the most important factor that individual and the community consumption is of energy is very important because it has effect in energy use, energy security, and sustainable future as well. Finally, that what we are doing now to focus on the technological innovation. This is what we are doing in Abu Dhabi and UAE, and we are leading in advanced digital capabilities across all the sector. Moving forward, we will focus on exploring artificial intelligence, big data analytics, to gain a better insight into industry development and to improve the system and economic resilience.
Perfect, thank you. And I think UAE was one of the first people to have a Minister of AI, wasn't it? So you're definitely advancing things using the technologies, yes. Okay, let's maybe move over to Japan. Professor Terazawa, potentially talk to us a bit more about the challenges across wider Asia and the pragmatic steps that you think we should be taking together. Oh, I think you're on mute still.
Sorry.
That's okay. We've done it many times before.
Asia, in particular, the ASEAN countries face a number of difficult challenges to realize carbon neutrality. First of all, Asia is the growth center of the world. When you are growing strongly, it will be more difficult to realize carbon neutrality. Second, we expect the cost to realize carbon neutrality in Asia to be very expensive. My institute, IEJ, has done a survey, a research on this issue, and we estimate that the annual cost to reach carbon neutrality by 2060 for the ASEAN countries can be 2.5% of the GDP on an annual basis. And to realize carbon neutrality earlier, by 2050, the percentage could rise to 2.9%. In addition to the strong growth, the fleet of very young coal-fired power plants in Asia would make it more expensive to retire them early. The third challenge is that, unfortunately, Asia cannot enjoy the full potential renewable energies as in other countries. Most of Asia does not enjoy the strong and constant winds that are available in Europe. The flat space for solar panels would have to compete with other uses, such as farming in a very densely populated region. And the long rainy season in Asia would make it necessary to maintain a very large power storage capability. So for these reasons, I think it is extremely important for Asia to develop a very pragmatic and cost-efficient path to realize carbon neutrality. You cannot reach carbon neutrality in a single step. There has to be a number of stages to reach carbon neutrality. To be sure, we need to pursue renewable energies throughout all the period. But having said so, for the first stage, especially towards 2030, we believe that the transition from coal to gas would be the major pillar of the strategy for Asia, and LNG and gas-fired power plants would play a major role in this first stage. The second stage would be more of a combination: coal-fired power plants, using coal firing with ammonia, or gas-fired power plants being co-fired with hydrogen, or gas-fired power plants utilizing CCU or CCUS, capturing carbon. That's for the second stage. The third stage, towards 2050 and beyond, we expect solar power and 100% ammonia-fired power plants to provide the majority of power generation in the ASEAN countries. Geothermal, biomass, and hydrogen-fired power plants would certainly have a meaningful role, but the two major players would be solar power and ammonia as the fuel to power the ASEAN countries. To sum up, for Asia, with all the difficult challenges facing Asia, we need to develop a very pragmatic, cost-efficient, and staged approach to realize carbon neutrality.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Professor. Maybe I can switch to Joseph. Joseph, in your role with the International Energy Forum, this must be on the tip of your tongue pretty much every day. So those pragmatic steps that the professor just mentioned, where are you seeing the best traction and maybe the fastest moves that are actually making, the right positive moves?
Thanks, and it's great to be here with this great panel and speaking once again at the Singapore Energy Week conference. I guess I'm going to talk about something different, but I think just as critical to the topic today, and that's that we need to ensure that we don't lose public support for climate progress. And I think it's critical that we don't let a climate crisis turn into an energy crisis. We need to keep making progress on climate action, while at the same time ensure we have the energy supplies today to power the global economy. And the professor just referenced this. Gas markets in Europe and now Asia are on red alert. Natural gas is now the most expensive fossil fuel on an energy equivalent basis, comparable to an oil price of about $200 per barrel. So I'm particularly worried that high energy prices and volatility that we're seeing now will undermine public support for climate action. And I think once you lose public support, it's going to be very hard to gain back. So I think we have to be very careful about the transition and paying attention to these market signals. As a result, the IF is announcing or has announced that we'll be hosting a special natural gas market dialogue meeting on Thursday with ministers from key producing and consuming countries, along with various industry experts. And so I think, to answer your question, I think to ensure the circular carbon economy and a sustainable future, we need to ensure energy market stability. And for that, governments need to ensure that the energy sector remains investable across the full spectrum of energy technologies, and also see to it that diverse energy and climate policies and the related ESG financing criteria respond to what the interconnected market signals and the underlying data on the fundamentals that shape them.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. And on the private sector side now, obviously, there's a lot of private companies setting their circular strategies, ambitious targets. Dr. Pandian, from your world of banking, financial services, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Thank you very much. Of course, the demand for waste to energy is increasing mostly from the government side. But the investment, if the government give proper confidence or proper assurance to pay market-related prices, then the private investment will pour in. But as pointed out by some of the speakers, the transition cannot be expected so quickly. We in the bank, we are committed for sustainable economic development. It's a sustainable environmentally, socially, and economically. And we have a strategy for by 2025, 50% of our investments should be climate related or climate friendly or climate resilient. This is a huge target which we have taken to ourselves. And also we want to align with the Paris alignment of all our investment by next year. So having said that, what is the reality? The reality is, since we are a part of the multilateral development bank, we cannot invest in coal. There's a lot of objections to invest in any of the fossil fuel, including the gas. But we have to realize that gas is going to be the major transition fuel in the days to come. If you neglect, if you say no to coal, no to nuclear, no to gas, then what else we are left with? We are left with renewables of solar and wind. But these are intermittent energies. If you want to use more and more of intermittent energies, yes, there is a demand from private sector because they find that they can make money in solar and wind. But we need to scale up our investment in modernizing the grid. Without proper transmission and distribution modernization, these intermittent energy cannot be transmitted and go to the back end. Also, now more investment will come from private sector if a proper research is there in energy storage or energy modernization. As Professor pointed out, there are a lot of demand is coming for hydrogen manufacturing, ammonia manufacturing. These are all the new area from the private sector. They see there will be money, but it has to be proved beyond doubt through various research that it is commercially viable. So we are waiting and we are watching. While we are going on investing in renewable energy every year, we need to look beyond the current period. If you want to decarbonize it quickly, then it can be done only with the renewable energy, and that needs huge investment in energy generation, energy transmission, energy distribution, and future energy. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Philippe, obviously you head up the energy management division for Schneider Electric. So what is your view on the private sector pushing towards this circular and greener economy? Doing enough?
Well, first of all, I'd like to quote three figures to set the stage, because in the end, companies are rational bodies. And when you look at the bigger picture, the truth is the humanity is consuming 1.7 Earths per year. We today, out of the 90 plus billion tons of mineral, fossil fuels, metals, and biomass, less than 10% goes in a circular system. And last but not the least, it's actually that whole circular economy is actually a major opportunity. It's seen as probably a 5 trillion additional economic output opportunity. So companies are rational. Hopefully they are more and more. And what we see, and talking with a lot of CEOs, is actually a lot of willingness and appetite to go towards more sustainable business model. That includes a more circular approach to ecosystem. So if we take the example of Schneider Electric, and I guess we will then talk about more technologies and so on. Actually, at Schneider, which has been rated as the most sustainable company in the world by Corporate Knight and within the World Economic Forum, we are doing a lot, and we've been doing a lot for quite many years. And we took a commitment, for instance, by 2025 that 50% of our materials would be green materials, whether plastic or metal. We are taking a commitment that we would design to be circular ready most of our products, and this will go up to 2050. We pledge that 100% of our packaging would be green by 2050. And last but not the least, we are committing ourselves to what we call life cycle services, retrofit, repair, refurbishment. That will be as many opportunities to make the most of what we are overall installing. So all in all, that circular economy is a great business opportunity, of course, for our customers, for the planet, for government, because it's creating jobs that you cannot move out to another country. These are a lot of local jobs. And of course, they are very good for the company. So that's why we are pushing for that, leading us to many recognition. We've been part of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation for actually since January 2015. We've been recognized in terms of by the World Economic Forum on our circular economy approach. And I guess a big part of the mission of Schneider, which is related to sustainability efficiency, is really geared square into that mission of circularity, but maybe we can talk about it in some follow-up questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And congratulations on the ranking. That sounds great. Okay, so a couple of you there mentioned the technologies and innovations. We had a panel just before this one all around innovation as well. So a couple of things that spring to mind. Obviously, there's a lot of new digital technologies. There's a lot of R&D. Professor, maybe you can talk to us a bit more about ammonia and hydrogen and the use of that and why you think that is so important to the future.
Well, thank you very much for the question. As I said, unfortunately, Asia, the potential of renewable energy in Asia is rather limited. Asia will have to utilize renewable energies in other regions. But the problem is that there is no transmission line connecting Asia with the regions with rich in renewable energies. And to overcome this problem, we believe that hydrogen can provide an answer to overcome this difficulty. If we can produce hydrogen from water using renewable energies, the produced hydrogen can be transported to Asia. This will basically enable Asia to utilize the renewable energies in other regions in an indirect manner. But there's another problem. It is very expensive to carry hydrogen in the absence of pipelines. You need to cool it down below minus 252 degrees Celsius to carry it as liquid. It's you have to cool it much cooler than the LNG. one of the innovation that could deal with this challenge is to transform hydrogen into ammonia. For ammonia, you only have to cool it to below minus 33 degrees Celsius. So it'll be much more inexpensive to carry ammonia compared with hydrogen. And hydrogen can be used as a fuel to coal-fire power plants in Asia. That can lead to reduction in carbon dioxide. So we believe ammonia. I take the point of Dr. Pandian that we need to have more demonstration, prove that this technology is viable, but we see a potential that hydrogen and then ammonia as a carrier can provide an answer for Asia to be able to utilize renewable energies in other regions. To make it even cheaper, there is another idea to produce ammonia from gas and capturing the byproducts of CO2 and then storing that CO2. We call it blue ammonia as opposed to green ammonia, which would be utilizing renewable energies. According to our calculation, the IEA's calculation, blue ammonia is by far the cheapest option among the decarbonized fuel. So this is, I think, the first step in using new types of decarbonized fuel. And in the long-term future, if the cost for electrolysis should drop substantially in the future, then green hydrogen or green ammonia could be more competitive. But if we're talking about 2030 or 2040s or the second stage, we believe that blue ammonia would be the pragmatic approach to help decarbonize the power sector in Japan and in Asia. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Sharma, maybe we can pick up on that question as well, if you could. I mean, in the UAE, there's a lot going on with ADNOC, TAQA, ADQ, announcing hydrogen partnerships, etc. How is that being seen as successful over there, and how is it going? Oh, I think you're on mute again.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, the sustainability objective positions Abu Dhabi to contribute to the global energy transition by driving responsible fossil fuel production and simultaneously reducing energy-related greenhouse gases emission. This made possible by available technology that help reduce greenhouse gas emissions from large-scale operations such as oil, gas, and heavy industry. Some of these technologies that are already gaining global momentum today includes CCUS, which is carbon capture, utilization, and storage, renewable hydrogen storage, energy storage, and waste to energy technologies. And you can see that the base of global energy transition can impact demand for oil and natural gas as well as the prices. But we know that no single energy sources can solve the global climate change so far issues or energy challenges. And the world will still rely on fossil fuel to meet the growing global energy needs in the coming decades. Therefore, our strategy in Abu Dhabi or UAE is focusing on economic diversification and to leverage the changes brought by the energy transition, take it as an opportunity to align our roles as an oil supplier to the international community with our climate ambitions. So we are trying to create a balance between diversified responsible oil and gas production sector and taking hold the bold measures to reduce domestic emissions. For example, as I said already, the CCUS technologies and deploying them at significant scale for CO2 enhanced oil recovery. And we are also stepping, as you mentioned before, that to the hydrogen, which has a great potential to support the transition to carbon neutral economy and responsible hydrocarbon industry capable of producing fuels and petrochemical products with low emissions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sharma. Joseph, carbon capture. We heard ExxonMobil talk about it this morning. We've had a number of other people talking about it. Is it one overarching strategy? Do we need to do more, do you think, from the, the IEF forum point of view? What's your view?
Yeah, I mean, the IF is seeing basically three areas where governments are focusing in terms of collaboration and investment. One is carbon capture, use, and storage, because it can meet the decarbonization of affordability and energy security goals in one strike.
Yep.
And of course, the quest for the hydrogen economy really depends on economy-wide uptake of CCUS. So from our standpoint, we think it's time to greenlight CCUS. Just like governments green-lighted energy efficiency in the 1970s, and now, of course, it's mainstream today. The other area is sort of infrastructure in transition, and the other speakers have touched on this as well, to ensure that existing and often aging, as well as yet to be developed infrastructure, can accommodate all the decarbonization and demand growth requirements of the green economy, and in addition, extreme weather events and other resiliency issues. And then the green hydrogen economy, of course, is a lot of governments are focusing on that. It's really being driven by the leadership from the EU. The U.S. government has asked the IEF to look at the initial, what does the initial market phase for green hydrogen and hydrogen look like? And so we'll be doing a report later this year. But finally, I would just like to say that the other area that we think governments need to focus more on, and we're starting to see more of this, is in increasing clean energy R&D. The IEA technology report that I'm sure everyone's familiar with said that half of the emissions reductions needed to meet the climate goals must come from new innovation and technologies. And so that really requires governments. I mean, companies are doing some of this, but governments really need to take the lead here. The U.S. has announced a fourfold increase in R&D spending. 10 days ago, President Macron introduced a new industrialization strategy that also called for a huge increase in investment in clean energy R&D. I know Singapore has made several announcements along this regard, and I think it's critical to meeting our climate goals. And here again, the IF will be developing a tracker of clean energy R&D by governments to monitor progress. So these are the areas we're seeing governments focus on.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. That's very positive. Philippe, potentially you could add to this for us. I mean, you've been at Schneider a long time. Schneider's a company that has always been at the forefront of technology innovation. So what is the firm doing these days to really push the boundaries of the green economy?
So I'd like maybe to react and complement what my fellow panelists have been going through. So we've been talking a lot about hydrogen, which is for sure a solution that's needed going forward. Now, green hydrogen might not be available at cost and at scale probably before 10 years. And we've talked before that we need to cut by 2 carbon emissions by 2030. So what we are doing at Schneider is concentrate on technology that are available now and that can be scaled now. We call it, and we see actually the 2 pillars of this revolution going with more electric, more digital, which we call electricity 4.0, the 4th stage of electricity. And we see really great potential. So more digital means, first of all, more energy efficiency. The best watt is a megawatt. We've not been talking much about it, but before thinking of producing more, why couldn't we think of consuming less while actually just being more efficient? And we see many technologies that are available today to make it work, which in turn provide better output for preventive maintenance, remote control, and stuff like this. Second point, more electric. We are convinced that electricity is the best vector for decarbonization. Take an example. When you put in place heat pump in a building, it's way more efficient than a chiller that would be operating with gas, 4 to 5 times, which goes in turn again in the direction of energy efficiency. And of course, that more electric means more renewable. And on that one, not to be controversial, but our experience has been that actually renewable energy can also be put in place in Asia. Now, maybe not always with large farms, but in a more decentralized manner. Today, we are deploying carbon energy neutral buildings We are doing that in Europe. We are also doing it in Asia. Homes, where actually the whole energy generation would be decentralized in a home or in a village in a context, say, of Indonesia, island like this. So bottom line, many technologies do exist. They mostly rely on electric and digital. And actually solutions are available today and really are what fuels us at Schneider is to deploy this electricity 4.0 world and actually make our customers either carbon neutral or energy neutral as soon as possible, but we believe it's possible today.
Okay, thank you very much. And last but not least, Dr. Pandian, green finance. I mean, we hear a lot about what the financial services industry is now doing to make sure that the environmental impact of activities are better. Well, what's your view on green finance? Are we doing enough right now, or is there a lot more to come in your banking world?
Yeah, I think we have initiated some activities buying the green bonds from the secondary market, but we have to be very careful. There should not be any greenwashing. The capital market has a lot to do in promoting the green finance. But MDBs like AIB will be very happy to work with the people, with the bond issuer, and we have already set aside quite a good amount for green financing. We are debating about that. I think soon we will come out with our own strategy how to improve the green finance so that it will energize the private sector people to issue the bond and get the money and to invest in circular economy.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So look, a lot to be encouraged about. Obviously, some work still to be done, but actions are in place. Governments are pushing very hard, it seems now. So firstly, I'd like to thank my panelists today for joining us here at Singapore International Energy Week. I think it's been a really interesting discussion. We need to keep pushing with technology. We need to keep pushing with innovation, keep education and awareness at the tip of our tongues for a number of activities. So yeah, thank you very much to all the panelists from around the world. Stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.
And thank you, Paul, for managing that very nicely as well. Thank you so much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for the next address, we have Mr. Shane Rattenbury, Attorney General, Minister for Consumer Affairs, Minister for Water, Energy and Emissions Reduction, Minister for Gaming, Australian Capital Territory. Here is his delivery.
Hello, I'm Shane Rattenbury, the leader of the ACT Greens and the ACT's Minister for Emissions Reduction. Today I'm speaking to you from Canberra, Australia, the home of the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of this land, and I recognise and respect their continuing culture and the many thousands of years of connection they've had to this land. Here in Australia, recognising our traditional custodians is a really important part of understanding the true history of Australia. Zero emissions, circular economy and sustainability are all big ideas with underlying complexities. But fundamental to all of these is a simple desire to ensure a future for ourselves and future generations that is environmentally sound and socially just. To achieve any of these goals requires an ongoing commitment to good science, honest engagement with the community and a willingness to challenge ourselves and others. The ACT government is proud to be a leader in addressing the challenge of climate change. We have legislated to reach zero emissions by 2045 at the latest, with interim targets along the way. These targets were set based on the scientific evidence of what is needed to avoid dangerous levels of global heating and support the certainty needed to invest in tomorrow's technologies. In 2020, we met the first of these interim targets by reducing ACT emissions by 40% below 1990 levels. We also achieved 100% renewable electricity for our city. We are the first jurisdiction in Australia to achieve this and one of the first in the world. Now, when we set these targets, they seemed improbable, if not even impossible. But focusing on these targets helped us develop innovative approaches, such as our reverse auction for renewable energy, and achieve them against the odds. Setting those targets really does provide the focus and the direction for helping you get where you want to go. Now, our next challenge is to address emissions from natural gas use and transport, which will require more innovation and a strong commitment from our community to change the way we heat and cool our homes, cook our food, and the way we travel about town. The transition to a circular economy is another important part of our vision for a sustainable future for all. The ACT has achieved one of the highest rates of resource recovery in Australia, at over 70%. Those resources are circling back into the economy as electricity from landfill, organic products for the landscaping industry, recycled building materials, and more. We also have a target to further increase resource recovery by 2025, and will soon be trialling government organic waste collection to reduce increased landfill. Emissions from waste make up around 7% of our total emissions, so this approach contributes to both the circular economy and also our path to zero emissions. But we do need to recognise that our sustainability goals also have resource implications, and we need to think carefully to make sure these resources remain in the system through a circular economy. As we start to see the first major investments in solar panels reach the end of their lives, we will need to enhance our ability to recycle these panels. At the moment, we have no industry that does that. We know that batteries are an important part of the renewable energy revolution. And we know that while there are options for reuse, we have not yet developed any of these approaches that we will need to reuse batteries and manage them at the end of their life. We need to face these challenges and innovate to develop integrated solutions to these issues so that the sustainability agenda is truly sustainable. We also need to recognise that as a prosperous society, our consumption of goods and services has environmental impacts well beyond our borders. There have been steps taken to increase understanding of this issue and help consumers make different choices. But this is a difficult issue for all of us to face. As affluent societies, we need to truly understand that our environmental footprint goes well beyond the obvious issues we think about day to day. As part of our efforts to address broader climate impacts of decisions, the ACT government is implementing a social cost of carbon to be applied to emissions from government operations. Funds will be directed towards efforts to further reduce emissions, helping to accelerate our decarbonisation. We are also doing some initial work towards estimating our Scope 3 emissions, the emissions generated in manufacturing goods and growing food that we consume here in the Territory. This is a greater challenge, but will inform our work to influence supply chains through advocacy and choosing low-embodied emissions products. So, we have taken great steps forward. Science tells us, though, that we have much more to do. We must continue our efforts. We know what needs to be done, and we are seeing households and businesses respond to the challenge. Experience tells us that with ambitious targets based on science and effective leadership, our community will be able to make the transition we need to achieve a sustainable future. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this conference, and I wish you well through the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Minister, sir. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our final keynote speaker for the day is none other than Her Excellency Patricia Espinosa, Executive Secretary, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Your Excellency, please.
Colleagues, it's a pleasure to join you today, and I thank the Energy Market Authority of Singapore for hosting this timely and important event. We are now only days away from the opening of COP26, the most important climate conference since the adoption of the Paris Agreement in 2015. Addressing energy is at the heart of the deep and lasting transformation we must make to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. Today, 75% of global emissions are caused by our need for energy. This includes electricity, heat, transportation, and much more. If we're to collectively achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement and limit global temperatures to 1.5 degrees by the end of the century, nations and businesses must commit to a deep and lasting transformation of how they produce, use, and distribute that energy. The solutions are diverse, the ideas many, and your contributions at this Energy Week will add to them. But here are 4 key outcomes that experts say are needed to achieve this great transformation. We need to see the end of extraction and transformation of fossil fuels into electricity. By 2050, electricity needs to be zero emission, mainly powered by renewable energy. What can be electrified needs to be electrified, particularly transport. And where energy demand can't be electrified, we need to look towards developing advanced biofuels and technologies so that we can turn our soon-to-be zero-emission electricity into clean synthetic fuels. For example, green hydrogen and other e-fuels and gases. None of this can happen without innovation. Governments and businesses must not only invest in it, they must support and integrate it at all levels. They must also lead the way in planning and promoting clean energy infrastructure investment, including in matters of transmission and distribution. Finally, governments must ensure coherence between national climate action plans, known as NDCs, and national energy policy. Parties must commit to submitting new and more robust national climate action plans, period. This means plans with strong renewable energy targets and a path to achieve them. We must ensure, however, that the great transition related to energy is a just one. We cannot repeat the mistakes of history, in which great transformations have great and negative impacts on the most vulnerable. Government policy must reflect the need for retraining, redeployment, support, and more. This can and must be part of national climate action plans. Vulnerable nations need support to develop these plans and much more. That's why it's so important that developed nations fulfill the commitment to mobilize the 100 billion for vulnerable nations. Dear colleagues, we don't have a moment to lose. The stakes couldn't be any higher. I look forward to hearing the results of these discussions and continue to urge you to keep moving the clean energy conversation forward. It's not only important, it's at the heart of what could ultimately decide whether we are successful or not in meeting our climate goals and ultimately ensuring the longevity of humanity on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of the Singapore Energy Summit